Okay, let's dive right in. We're going to unpack a pretty provocative and, frankly, disturbing argument. It draws a direct line from the global power structures set up right after World War II to some of the darkest corners of our culture today.
Here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with a really telling scene, then jump back in time to the historical moment that set all this in motion. After that, we'll get into a core metaphor, a kind of key to understanding the roles different global players have. And finally, we'll see how this whole framework gets applied to something as disturbing as the normalization of abuse.
All right, our journey starts in a very familiar place, the Oval Office. A seemingly normal meeting, but if you look closely, you can see a hidden script playing out, a power dynamic that's been on the world stage for more than 75 years. This scene is really our way into a much bigger and much darker story.
So what's happening here? This is a well-rehearsed dance. You have Washington setting the tone, basically dictating the conversation. Then you have Tokyo, carefully adjusting its position, staying within very clear boundaries. And Europe? Well, Europe acts as the reinforcement, the consensus builder. This isn't just a one-off thing. It's a perfect snapshot of a power hierarchy that's been locked in for decades.
And this is where the argument takes a really startling turn. The source makes a bold claim. This exact same power dynamic, this three-part structure, doesn't just run international politics. It also shows up in one of the most disturbing parts of our culture, the normalization of pedophilia. The same roles, the same script that plays out in the halls of power is also, somehow, at work in the shadows of abuse.
Now you're probably asking, how could that even be possible? To get it, we have to rewind the clock. We need to go back to the moment this whole power structure was forged in the first place. We're talking August 1945. A moment that didn't just redraw the world map, but also fundamentally rewired how we even talk about power.
You see, the atomic bombs did more than end a war. They left a deep, lasting trauma on the Japanese psyche. What's called here a pervasive sense of victim consciousness. Then, the US occupation that followed wasn't just about rebuilding. It was about rewriting Japan's story, taking control of its entire narrative. And this is so important because this historical wound and this loss of control over their own story becomes absolutely central to Japan's role later on.
So, long before we even get to the topic of abuse, this three-part global structure is set in stone. The US is in command, Japan is the object to be managed and remade, and Europe serves as the arbiter of high culture and legitimacy. This, according to the source, is the absolute bedrock. It's the historical foundation that everything else we're about to discuss is built on.
Okay, so to help us really visualize this whole complex dynamic, the source gives us a powerful metaphor, a puppet show. So let's break down the three key parts of the show: the marionette, the strings, and the control bar. First, you've got the marionette. This is the figure on stage that grabs all the attention, right? It's where we project our feelings, our fantasies. In this argument, Japan is cast as the marionette. Its historical trauma gets channeled through these stylized, animated, and often childlike bodies, what the source calls minor-coded bodies. They're figures that appear to suffer, but also to perform for an audience.
So what makes the marionette move? The strings. But these aren't just literal strings. They represent the forces that give the puppet's movements meaning. And more importantly, they provide an alibi, a cover for its more disturbing actions. The argument here is that Europe, with all its history of high culture and intellectual prestige, provides these strings. It offers this veneer of artistic legitimacy to situations that are, at their core, deeply abusive.
And then, finally, who's actually holding the whole thing? The control bar. This isn't about art or ideas anymore. This is about raw power, logistics, and command. And this is where the United States comes in, with its history of shaping global narratives and its networks of elite power. You see this most clearly, the source argues, when you look at the operational world of Jeffrey Epstein, a world built on elite power, logistics, and pure exploitation.
Okay, now that we have the roles straight, the marionette, the strings, and the control bar, we're ready to look at the most disturbing part of this thesis. We're going to see how this geopolitical puppet show actually plays out in the real world, inside the dark and often hidden archive of abuse normalization.
This table just lays it all out, plain and simple. It shows this chillingly direct parallel between the geopolitical roles set up after the war and the roles each player takes in the normalization of abuse. Japan, the wounded and managed ally, becomes the supplier of minor-coded imagery. Europe, the zone of cultural prestige, provides the artistic cover, what's called here pseudo-art house legitimacy. And the US, the center of command power, supplies the elite logistical and financial networks that allow these abusive systems to operate.
So what's the actual evidence for Japan's role as the marionette? Well, you don't have to look far. It's written right into the country's legal battles and cultural debates. You have things like the 2014 law that specifically exempts fictional depictions, creating this massive, dangerous gray area where exploitation can just flourish. We're not just talking about artistic freedom here, we're talking about a systemic pattern. And in Europe, especially in France, you can really see the power of this prestige field at work. This is the world of high culture, of literary prizes and film festivals, a world that has again and again thrown a protective blanket over abusers. From that infamous 1977 petition defending sex with minors, all the way to the recent allegations by Judith Godré, the pattern is disturbingly clear. It's a culture of impunity, often disguised as artistic genius. Then we get to the United States, where we see the control bar in action. This isn't about ideas. It's about the cold, hard reality of logistics and elite protection. I mean, the Jeffrey Epstein case is a textbook example of how this whole system functions. You have a network of powerful people, financial giants like Deutsche Bank that just looked the other way, and a justice system that for years just completely failed to hold them accountable. This isn't about one evil man, it's about a system built to protect the powerful.
So the big question remains, how did Japan end up as the marionette in this global show? To answer that, we have to go right back to the source of its national trauma, the atomic bombs. We're about to explore this really strange and fascinating story of how a nation's unbelievable pain was transformed into a world of animated bodies, a world that would later be hijacked for a much darker purpose. As scholars like Susan Napier have pointed out, animation became a vital tool for Japan to process its collective trauma. When words weren't enough, these animated figures became a new kind of language, a way to express the unspeakable. But the problem is, this very same cultural technology, this ability to create proxy bodies to carry historical pain, was later used to create bodies that could carry our darkest fantasies.
And listen, this isn't just some abstract academic theory. The link between the bomb and animation is woven into the very fabric of Japanese culture. The fact that the very first Hiroshima International Animation Festival was held to commemorate the bombing, that's a powerful and public acknowledgement that, in Japan, animation isn't just entertainment. It's a tool for remembering and a tool for survival. So here it is, the tragic path of the marionette. It all starts with a wound, a national trauma so deep it can't be healed with words. So then comes the proxy, the animated body that can bear the pain real bodies can't. But this proxy, this vessel for trauma, also becomes a vessel for desire. And just like that, the figure created to express pain is co-opted to express a sexual charge. The marionette, once a symbol of suffering, becomes a symbol of sexualized projection. And all of this leaves us with a pretty chilling question. If this global power structure can shape the fates of entire nations, what else can it do? Is it possible that the same logic that moves armies and topples governments is also at work quietly in the most private corners of our lives, shaping our desires, our fantasies, and even our darkest pathologies? It's a disturbing thought, but one that feels pretty important to confront.